Major breaking news today. The Indy Lights Series will suspend its 2020 season. They will not run a single race. The season is canceled. Now, it's important to note that series officials, despite the cancellation, are planning on returning in the 2021 season. The series specifically mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic playing a large role in the cancellation of this year's series. Now, you may know the Indy Lights Series perhaps for its most famous race, the Freedom 100 at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which is so legendary now in such a short period of time for the incredibly exciting finishes, often 2, 3, 4 abreast, coming across the start-finish line on the end of that 40th lap. It's one of the most special parts of the month of May. It's a brand new tradition. It's such a shame that that has gone away, but perhaps even more of a shame is the fact that for the first time since the series began in 2002 as what was then known as the Menards Infiniti Pro Series, IndyCar no longer has a direct step below the top rung of the sport. There's no longer a connecting tissue between the bottom rungs of the road to Indy and the top. And the Indy Lights Series was such an important, or I guess I should say is still such an important part of the IndyCar series. In fact, 23 of the 33 starters in last year's Indianapolis 500 had some sort of road to Indy connection. And I just hope that this series comes back because it has played a major role, in my opinion, in the resurgence of IndyCar racing, helping grow homegrown stars for the series. And of course, I have to extend as well my deepest sympathies and condolences to those individuals who not only drive in the series. I know I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy Robert McGinnis. I know he's hurting a little bit right now, but also the crew members, the team owners. It's a big risk to go Indy Lights racing, and the fact that the season is not happening, this has got to be a huge hit for all of them. So we're definitely thinking about you. In this video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on exactly what has happened, but I'm also going to explain some, I would describe as misconceptions about the Indy Lights Series, because I think it's misunderstood, and I think that's where a lot of uninformed statements are being made right now. So I think first we have to establish what the Indy Lights Series is and what it represents to IndyCar. Of course, you already heard me in that intro. 23 of the last 33 starters in the Indianapolis 500 had Road to Indy experience. And if you look at some of the major stars, in fact, the champion of the series right now, Joseph Newgarden, is a driver who came up through that Road to Indy program, particularly Indy Lights. The scholarships that are provided through the Road to Indy are intended to take a driver all the way from USF 2000 all the way up into the IndyCar series. And it's worked to a certain extent. I think I would describe it as a success in that respect. And that's exactly what it's supposed to be as a series. And this is where I think a lot of confusion comes in, because I see a lot of people saying, oh, good riddance, it only had 8 cars. Oh, Indy Lights sucked anyway. Indy Lights was never an entertainment-based series. It was never a series that was going to sell tickets. That's not the intention. It's an investment series, which is to say, well, like I said, development. It's a development series. That is the purpose of Indy Lights. So from a driver development standpoint, I don't think it could have gone any... I mean, of course, you could talk about the cost, and believe me, we're going to talk about the cost. But I think if you look at the results, you can't really say that Indy Lights didn't do its job. The issue that, again, people are kind of looking from the outside looking in, believe me, I've been guilty of this in the past. They see those small grids and they judge Indy Lights up against something like, say, Xfinity, or even, I think you could say to a certain extent, Formula 2, though I think there's a little bit more crossover between that series and Indy Lights. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't really understand, don't realize, is that a series like Xfinity has a major TV deal. They're on Fox Sports 1 virtually every race. Sometimes they get bumped to Fox Sports 2, but of course, also sometimes they end up on the big Fox, network television. That's a huge part of being able to allow some of the drivers in that series to make it their full-time job. It's not how Indy Lights works. Again, it's totally about driver development. So if you're going in with a budget to Indy Lights, you are not going to expect any return on investment from Indy Lights. There's no TV deal. In fact, I could rant all day about the fact that I think one of the big mistakes that they made, and this is my opinion, it was putting NBC Sports Gold, or putting Indy Lights on NBC Sports Gold exclusively behind a paywall, because you already had a very small, but I would say dedicated, audience of people who watched Indy Lights on YouTube, built that kind of interest. So when they were on TV, say for the Freedom 100 or something, people would know to tune into that. But by locking the entire series behind NBC Gold, you pretty much cut off any potential sponsorship that was ever going to be sold. And that's implying that there was a whole lot of sponsorship to begin with in the Indy Lights. So that's a big problem. The people who are there in Indy Lights are the ones who are willing to spend between $700,000 and $1 million in hopes of winning a scholarship to go to IndyCar, or at least get experience to go to IndyCar or move on to other Formula series within the world. So again, maybe you might say it's a flawed business model, and I definitely think there are some serious flaws. Again, it's hard to confirm some of this stuff. I have been talking to several people that I consider to be in the know about this, just trying to get an idea of exactly what goes on in Indy Lights, because there isn't as much coverage of the series, and sometimes it's difficult to find correct information. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out about Indy Lights. The costs are astronomical. I've been told that, again, this is what I've been told, that the parts for the Indy Lights car, the IL-15, which is a newer car by 3 years than the one currently utilized in IndyCar, the DW12, the parts cost more for the Indy Lights car, generally speaking, than they do to replace them on the IndyCar. Now, I think there's several reasons for that. Number one, there probably wasn't a very favorable deal negotiated when the series chose Dallara as their supplier. The other thing is, of course, Dallara doesn't want to lose money. And if you're looking at kind of some of the Indy Lights grids the last few years, at most you're probably expecting around 16 cars. And at the least, you're probably looking at 7, 8, maybe even 6 in absolutely the worst case scenario. So obviously, Dallara doesn't want to they're not in the business of losing money, and nothing against them for that. But I would imagine that's probably contributes to the cost being higher on those particular parts. But of course, then that raises the question, why are the Indy Lights cars so expensive? And then you start seeing people saying, well, it's because they race on ovals. From what I understand, that is not true. In fact, I've heard the opposite, which is that the Indy Lights weekends that are on the oval tracks are actually less expensive to participate in than the ones on the road courses, because the oval events are only 2 days. Now, granted, they do have to buy brand new parts, the oval track wings, and you also have inherent risk of potentially writing off an entire chassis, because when you crash at 200 miles an hour, that is usually going to be a very expensive repair on the best of days. But less track time generally means less wear and tear. And if you've got a driver that's not going to put it in the fence, you generally can do that less expensively. That's probably part of the reason why we see a higher grid at many of the oval track. Well, let's point this out. We usually see a higher grid at the Freedom 100, and that's the reason why. You can get extra entries because it's a lower cost barrier to get in there, and it's also higher profile. So, and that's one thing that I really do feel bad about, is the fact that the Freedom 100 is not going to happen this year, and that event is potentially in jeopardy, because the Freedom 100, I think many people would agree that is one of the best motorsports events, period, on the year. In terms of bang for your buck, excitement, I think that event is just so awesome, and it's such a shame to see it go away. I mean, it's literally the best part of Carb Day, as far as I'm concerned. It's why you should show up to Carb Day. Screw the freaking concert. I want to see, the 3-4 abreast racing that those kids put on in Indy Lights. It's absolutely fantastic. And that sucks. That really, really sucks. And also, again, from a series perspective, you look at all these drivers. You look at champion drivers like Askew and Piggott and Herta and all these guys who have come in, Newgarden, Daly, even though Daly didn't win a championship there. You see these guys who have risen through the ranks. Renus VK is another one. I could probably name half the field, over half the field. It is such a shame. And I don't really know what the solution is. Here was a couple of things I was kind of thinking about. If it is indeed true that the Lights car is that much more expensive to maintain than an Indy car, perhaps when IndyCar goes to a new chassis design, which apparently is going to happen within 2 years or so, again, we're going to have to see pandemic-wise, economy-wise, how that's going to play out. Why not use the old Indy cars to run as Lights, possibly with a less expensive engine? Maybe you put the AER motor, mount that into the current DW12 chassis, and use the DW12s as the Indy Lights. Maybe that's a way you could get costs down, get that used car market going again, kind of like it used to be in the 90s, where you'd have small teams trying to join the Indy 500, and they'd buy year or 2 or 3 year old cars from the bigger teams. Well, maybe we could see something like that here. It might also save teams like Andretti Autosport some money. They don't have to buy a new Indy Lights chassis. They can put their old cars back into service. I don't know. And maybe it would encourage some other teams to join Indy Lights, because then they wouldn't have to spend all the money buying a chassis. You could say like a Ganassi could just take their, Scott Dixon's old car, throw an AER motor in the back of it, have a spec body kit, or just literally keep the old body kits, and that's Indy Lights. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities out there, and I just hope this series does not die, because in my opinion, it is such a good thing for the sport, and I'm just so disappointed that it's not going to continue. But it does definitely seem like if it was on this much of a knife's edge, that the costs were this much, that potentially 3 or 4 teams have dropped out, that was an inherent issue that needed to be addressed at some point, because it was probably inevitable anyway. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Again, I'm sorry for all the people who lost their jobs. I hope they are able to find a new one. It sucks. This is just, again, we're kind of seeing some of the end results of this pandemic. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.